سوف نبقى هنا كي يزول الألم سوف نحيا هنا سوف يحلو النغم موطني ذا اللباب موطني يا أنا رغم كيد العدا رغم كل النقم سوف نسعى إلى أن تعم النعم سوف نرنو إلى رفع كل الهمم بالمسير للعلا ومناجاة القمم فلنقم كلنا بالدواء والقلم كلنا عفو على من يصارع السقم فلنواصل.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. And welcome to Islamic Oasis Live. Today, brothers and sisters, we have a very interesting discussion. As you all know, Britain or London may be going through a whole different, another phase of democracy, whatever that actually or really means. And you've heard that Islamic movements in England or in London or Britain in general are being banned. We don't know what the definition of freedom of speech actually means anymore. And there's a lot going on within, of course, with the Muslims in the area, with the ongoing war in Gaza. It's affecting many parts of the Muslim world and also Muslims wherever they are. And so to discuss this, the issue in England, Gaza, and just the bans that are happening upon the Muslim, in Muslim groups, we brought our brother Roshan M, Salih, who is editor of Five Pillars. Many of you know Five Pillars, very well-known Muslim, probably one of the first Muslim channels, media outlet out there that people actually look to, trust, and look forward to seeing what they have to say. An independent news and opinion analysis-based website which concentrates on British Muslims, but also looks to wider Islamic world. Saleh has been a journalist for 21 years, starting his career in local newspapers in UK before moving into TV journalism with London Weekend Television. Then Al Jazeera English, an Islam channel, and Press TV, where he was head of news in London for 5 years. And you can also follow him on Twitter at RM Saleh and buy his book, Confessions of Muslim Journalist. That seems to be an amazing book to read. Brother Roshan, welcome to Islamic Oasis Live.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Muhammad. Nice to be here.
Assalamu. Sheikh, I didn't know you wrote a book, Confession of Muslim Journalists. Must be a very interesting book. Is this because? Go ahead, just tell me a little bit about your book because we have a lot to talk about. But I didn't know about this, especially. It looks like one of those confessions of an economic hitman.
Yeah, I wrote it about 5 or 6 years ago, and it needs an update, to be honest, because some of my views have changed. But it's basically about my career in journalism, because alhamdulillah, I've had a kind of a front seat in history, I guess, and a lot of Islamic history as well over the last kind of 25 years. And so I thought I had a few good stories to tell. So I thought, why not tell them? And it's from a perspective of a Muslim journalist. So that is someone who's a Muslim first and foremost, and a journalist second. So I don't believe in journalistic neutrality. I believe in championing the Muslim community, and ultimately my journalism is a form of dawah, and I thought it would just be, because I've obviously worked in the mainstream media for the first kind of 6 or 7 years of my career, but after that in the alternative media, and especially in the Muslim media. I've also worked for state media companies, and so I've got quite a good perspective on all types of media, kind of mainstream media, state-sponsored media, independent media, etc. So I thought I'd put some of those words into my book.
Sheikh, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, so you've covered basically all different type, the whole spectrum. Uh, What is the difference, Sheikh, when it comes to state media and then the independent media? I mean, obviously now you're an independent journalist, and Five Pillars also probably a unique. Um, you work within the Muslim community. I haven't, we don't have something called Five Pillars in the U.S. It would be awesome to have something like that. So how do you? What's the difference, and what have you learned, or what have you? What are you thinking, Sheikh?
Okay, well, I mean, the mainstream media, obviously, channels like BBC and Sky News, and in America, I guess CNN, channels like that. Obviously, they are there to advocate a certain state perspective. So, and obviously they have values which are liberal, capitalistic, within that kind of, democratic, liberal framework. So I think that what I learned is that working in that kind of framework taught me a lot of the journalistic skills that I have today in terms of professionalism, in terms of production values. But in terms of ethics, it's not a place where a Muslim can thrive. Not a practicing Muslim anyway. And that's where you see the kind of brown faces and brown Muslim faces that you'll see in the mainstream media. They're not very practicing Muslims by and large. And they don't represent the values of their community. Rather, they're kind of, dark faces in high places, And so that's why I didn't last very long in the mainstream media, because I felt that I was doing work which was antithetical to my religion, and I wasn't representing who I was in my community. I'll give you an example. I was in the mainstream media when the Iraq War started, and I had to work on a program called The Case for War in Iraq. And I was like, I don't want to work on this program. I don't want to work. This is exactly the opposite of what I believe in. So this was kind of the breaking point for me, where I just left the mainstream media after having contributed to a program which obviously was completely against my beliefs, and I felt I felt dirty working on it, So then I moved to Al Jazeera, which was a much better experience. I lived in the Middle East for several years, and in terms of the values that I had as a Muslim, they were much more kind of compatible with Al Jazeera. However, not completely, because even Al Jazeera is state-sponsored media. So, for example, if Qatari foreign policy changes from one day to the next, so will Al Jazeera's editorial line. So I didn't feel very comfortable for that. Then I moved, then I worked for a Saudi channel as well in the UK. And again, the same kind of issues. Of course, most of it I was comfortable with as a Muslim. About 30% of it I didn't like because it was more attuned to Saudi foreign policy. And then, believe it or not, I went to an Iranian channel after that as well. And again, it was the same issues. Sometimes I liked the stuff they were doing on the Palestinians, but I disliked the stuff they were doing, on other parts of the world, etc. So I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, even working for Muslim countries, that had a certain, that had media organizations. That's when I started Five Pillars. I thought I need to work in the independent media here. I need to launch an organization where the constitution is literally Quran and Sunnah, not Iranian foreign policy, Qatari foreign policy, Saudi foreign policy, not sectarian based. So I didn't want to work for the Salafis or the Deobandis or the Sufis. I wanted to work for kind of Muslims as a community, so I didn't want it to have a sectarian flavor either. And I think a lot of the Muslim media that we have today is either state-sponsored or has a sectarian flavor. Whereas my idea was to have something which was independently funded so that we could maintain an independent editorial line which can conform with Quran and Sunnah. But also, just so that we could write whatever we want without fear or favor, without being in the pocket of one state or one sectarian group, etc. The problem with the independent media, even though it's more kind of, I can sleep much better at night these days. But the problem with it is that it's not well funded. So it took us quite a long time. For the first, Five Pillars has been going for 10 years now. And for the first 5 years, it was just a labor of love. I wasn't earning any money from it. I had another full-time job while I was doing it. and I was just getting expenses out of it, really, but not a salary. So the problem with alternative media is that you can't fund yourself, you know. However, alhamdulillah, after about 5 years of very hard work and establishing the brand, I think Muslims could see the necessity. You know, they no longer believe in mainstream media because they can't get their voices heard. In fact, they believe that mainstream media is perhaps the biggest purveyor and disseminator of Islamophobia in the world and beats the drum of war in Muslim countries, etc., etc. And I think they don't even trust state-sponsored Muslim media completely either, like Al Jazeera or TRT, even though they think it's better. Still, Al Jazeera English, for example, will have a pro-LGBT line, for example, you know, and it will even have reports advocating abortion. So, you know, as a Muslim, you can't live with that, really. Whereas Al Jazeera Arabic has a much more Islamic line, I would say, but not completely. So alhamdulillah, people saw the need for Five Pillars. The money started coming in, the donations, the subscriptions, the advertising. So for the last 5 years, alhamdulillah, I've been working on it full time. Me and a few other colleagues, and we've been able to take a reasonable salary out of it and being able to kind of support our families, etc., etc. And this is what I intend to do for the rest of my life, inshallah.
Wow. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sheikh, I mean, how important is it now? I mean, first, I actually, a little bit, you worked at all of these different places. You know, Al Jazeera Arabi is different than Al Jazeera English. You know, when we are watching the English one, it's completely different. Even the graphics, the footage that they use is different. Sometimes it's like now when I'm watching the Gaza situation, the Al Jazeera Arabi is probably at the rated highest ever, because they're showing everything. They're not hiding anything. How does that work, Sheikh? I mean, when you look at the journalists who are working on the Arabic part and then the English part, do they? English obviously is watched more by the Western media or the Western audience. Is that they're just trying to cater to the Western audience, or are they trying to? It's just the Arab are different. They know that they have to show them the way things are. I mean, how do they manage that narrative? I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Okay. Well, basically, no media institution exists in a vacuum, and ultimately, if you follow the money, you probably understand.
I see what you're saying.
How a media organization works. And Al Jazeera is ultimately funded by the Qatari royal family. So you have to look at Qatar's politics. So Qatar basically has two main constituencies. It has the Arab and Muslim constituency, and it has the Western constituency. So Al Jazeera Arabic is basically for the Arabs. Al Jazeera English is for the West. Now, Qatar, I mean, I lived there for several years. Obviously, it has a huge Western airbase, which was used to launch the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So Qatar is well in there with the West. It has investments all over the Western world. So it has a very important Western constituency, which it needs to please. And Al Jazeera Al Jazeera English is ultimately for them. It's kind of for Westerners with a bit of a left-leaning bent. But it isn't an Islamic channel, and it isn't an Arab channel, and it is. And the journalists that work for there, some are very right wing, some have worked for Fox News, some have worked for the CIA, even. You know, it has a mixture of journalists. Some are very good journalists, very practicing Muslims. So it has a big mix. But the decision makers ultimately are not practicing Muslims, and a lot of them aren't even Muslim. So when you watch the channel, you can probably understand why it's that way. Whereas Al Jazeera Arabic, by and large, most of its journalists are practicing Muslims. However, some are just Arab nationalists. Some are maybe non-Muslims as well. There could be Christians, there could be Druze, there could be, you know. But generally, you can say that it has a more Islamic bent. And that is why, during this current Gaza crisis, it has excelled in its coverage. And it has possibly been the go-to channel, and I wish more Muslims could speak Arabic fluently. I speak Arabic pretty well and understand it almost fluently. but most Muslims can't. So they're watching the English channel rather than the Arabic channel, which is unfortunate. But the Arabic channel has absolutely excelled itself, I think.
Yeah,
over the
no,
last,
of course. When I'm watching the Arabic one, it's beyond belief, and then you just, it's like whole different worlds. But Sheikh, Qatari government is very interesting that it allows Al Jazeera to do what it's doing, especially the Arabic one. And is that to, but when you say catering to the Arabs, meaning in your mind, that brings a different question, Sheikh, meaning the populations that they are catering to, do you think that they are, in general, more or bigger percentages at least, are Muslim minded, Islamic minded? They want Islam, or is it just that it's the Arab thing?
No, I think you have to look at the geography of where Qatar is. So Qatar is a very small place, surrounded by Saudi Arabia on the one hand, on Iran on the other. It has a huge Western air base there, effectively to protect itself from Saudi Arabia. So Qatar sees itself as a very small country, but one that punches above its weight. And it does that through having good relations with seemingly contradictory allies. So on the one hand, it will get on quite well with Iran, which helped it very well during the siege on Qatar for those 3 years. And it will get on well with the West. It will try to get on well with Saudi Arabia, but sometimes it falls out with Saudi Arabia. And it has investments all over the world. So it has multiple constituencies, and it's trying to appeal to all those constituencies. It's actually playing a very clever double game, triple game. But yeah, that's why I always say you can't really understand Al Jazeera Arabic or Al Jazeera English without understanding first the geopolitics of Qatar itself. And I could extend that to talking about the BBC and understanding the geopolitics of the United Kingdom, or CNN with the United States, So all these channels will ultimately, they're not really independent channels. They will take their cue from the foreign policy of the state to which they belong to. On some issues, they can be quite independent. On some issues, they can even go against the government. There's a certain freedom that these countries or these channels will have. But generally, we can say they will closely follow the foreign policy of the governments and the countries in which they're situated.
Allah. How important is it, Sheikh, for Muslims to come into this industry? First of all, what is your understanding of what is the percentage of the Muslims in this industry, number one, when you look at the industry from outside?
Tiny. I think in the UK, in the media, it's something like less than 1% of the population of journalists are Muslims. And in the UK, the percentage of Muslims in the country is something like 6-7%. So you can see they're very underrepresented. And I would assume that's the case in America as well.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just that. It possibly even lower. I mean, I think we definitely have a greater voice than American Muslims in this country, and more penetration into the media. But to be honest, the mainstream media, by and large now, is boycotting us. And we don't really have representative Muslim voices on the mainstream media. So, for example, at Five Pillars, we used to get invited onto the BBC and Sky News and all these big channels in the early days. But to be honest, I think we did a little bit too well. I think we kind of held our own a little bit too well. And we stopped getting invited after 3 or 4 years. And now we're hardly ever invited on. While we have become more of a voice for the Muslim community, we have become less present on the mainstream media. And it's not just us. It's many other kind of representative Muslim organizations and individuals and pundits, etc., etc. So this country, which generally has had a more of a multicultural approach to secularism, it's a secular country, but it's kind of been secularism with diversity. So they've celebrated diversity generally. I'm talking generally speaking, and they've allowed different ethnic minorities to express their racial and religious identity. But the issue with the Muslims is they haven't assimilated, like the Hindus have assimilated, like the Jews have assimilated, like other communities have assimilated. The Muslims have held on tightly to the rope of Islam, alhamdulillah, by and large. And I think now more and more kind of indigenous British people, if you want to call them that, they're getting concerned by that because they thought we would assimilate now. They thought we would abandon our religious values and we would have stopped talking about Khilafah and LGBT and all these hot button issues. And because we haven't done that, and even the younger generations have become more religious perhaps than their parents. I think now we're coming to a crisis point where the majority community is getting concerned that we're becoming a little bit too powerful. We have too many mosques, too many madrasas. We're too powerful. We have too many of our own powerful media institutions, etc., etc. And I think the banning on Hizb ut-Tahrir is coming within this context.
I was gonna get to that the issue of banning of Hizb ut-Tahrir. I mean, is it okay? I was worried to mention Hizb ut-Tahrir with you because you are in UK, and So what's happening, Sheikh? All of a sudden, an organization like Hizb ut-Tahrir, which everyone knows has no links to terrorism, has never committed any kind of violent crime, things like this. None of that. There's no other than intellectual work. But what you're saying, are you saying that look, Britain is the influence of the Muslims is so much in Britain that they are worried that the ideas that Hizb ut-Tahrir is presenting could become mainstream?
I have to choose my words very carefully because Hizb ut-Tahrir have been prescribed as a terrorist organization in the UK. That means that if you support them, or you invite for support for them, it is a criminal offence with a punishment of up to 14 years in jail.
Right. No, I heard
so
that. Yes.
This is literally the situation now in our country. This is probably the first time where a non-violent organisation has been banned and has been put on the same list as Al-Qaeda and Daesh and other terrorist organisations around the world that have actually killed people. So this decision seemed to be quite rushed through within a week. There wasn't much opposition to it. There was opposition from the Muslim community, but not coordinated, and they were caught a little bit surprised by it. So there wasn't a kind of an orchestrated campaign against the decision. No Muslim MPs. There's about 8 Muslim MPs in Parliament. None of them spoke up against the prescription. None of them even attended the debate about the prescription. So it was rushed through in about a week without any opposition. Now, all I can say is that there is an appeal going on. Hizb ut-Tahrir are appealing this, and they are going to say that they say they're not a terrorist organization, and they say that the prescription was not only unlawful but disproportionate as well, because the government have to prove that not only have Hizb ut-Tahrir broken the law, and what they said is Hizb ut-Tahrir basically praised Hamas and praised the October the 7th attacks. And that is against the law in this country because Hamas are also prescribed as a terrorist organization. So that's the government's argument that they praised Hamas. And the second argument, that they also have to prove that not only did they break the law, but a prescription would be proportionate. So Hizb ut-Tahrir will also try to argue that it was disproportionate because they're a non-violent organization. So even if they did do something like praise Hamas, it didn't have any kind of real-world negative action after that, consequence. So this will rumble on for another few months at least before their appeal gets decided upon. And then we'll see. I can't really say much about it, Sheikh, because I'm constrained. I did speak about it before the prescription, but as soon as the prescription came into play,
I understand. I don't want you to get in a situation. But let's talk more independent. Forget the Hizb, but what happens to the rest of Islamic movements or groups in UK, Sheikh? If this can happen to a group like that, let's say, what are the consequences now? I mean, they can come after Deoband next, right? I mean, they could come after Deoband if they want, and they can say, oh, you have fought the British in 1857. That makes you, can they do that? I mean, I guess what I'm asking you is intellectually, where is Britain going? And how dangerous is this that they are basically prescribing ideas as terroristic?
Okay, there's two questions there. So let me ask the first one about Hizb ut-Tahrir. So I don't think, I personally think that we have a right-wing government in this country, which is on its way out. Probably got another 8 months before it's due to be kind of elected out of power. And this conservative government, led by Rishi Sunak, is basically trying to veer as far right as possible because its votes are on the right. So I personally think that Hizb ut-Tahrir was kind of low-hanging fruit. It was an easy thing to do, to ban them, whereas it might be a harder thing to do to ban the Deobandis or the Barelvis, etc., etc. So I think it was something that was possible for them to do, so therefore they did it. It was something they could give to their right-wing constituency because their right-wing constituency will be very happy about the fact that, Hizb ut-Tahrir have basically have been told to shut up and they can't talk about Khilafah anymore. They can't talk about normative Islamic concepts like that. So that's the context behind the banning of Hizb ut-Tahrir. The wider question about where this country is going, I think I alluded to it earlier in that I think what I should do is compare Britain to France. So two big countries in Europe, the United Kingdom and France, both secular countries with a very different approach to multiculturalism. France, I've lived in France as well, has an approach to multiculturalism and secularism whereby it says everyone has to be French and you can't express your diversity. And that's why they are effectively closing mosques in France now. That's why they are closing down Muslim charities, and you can't express yourself as a French Muslim. They ban hijabs in schools and universities. Generally, French Muslims have no presence on the media, and they're scared to speak. And a lot of French Muslims are leaving to make hijrah, believe it or not, to the UK.
Oh, wow.
Not to Muslim countries. They'll go to UK because traditionally there's been more freedoms for Muslims in the UK. But what's happening here, we're a declining nation. We're not the great British Empire of the 19th century or the early 20th century. We're a declining nation, lots of economic problems, so it's easy to take it out on scapegoats, people that look different, speak different, have different ideas. So I think they're targeting Muslims, because we haven't integrated like other communities. And we're moving towards the French model here, whereby we're jettisoning multiculturalism in its diverse sense, and we're moving to a multiculturalism where we expect different communities to be British first and foremost, and to everything else should be subservient to that. So, for example, there's a school in North London which has banned prayer, and it's got a 50% Muslim intake. So most Muslims, most schools in this country, secular schools that is, they will allow Muslims to pray in their spare time, and in a corner or even some have prayer rooms and whatever, and they consider that if Muslims can express their religious identity to a certain extent, then they will be better pupils and they will get better educational outcomes as well. However, we're moving to the point where more and more schools now are saying no. So you can't fast during Ramadan. You can't pray.
No way.
When it's
in
time
Britain,
for prayer.
They actually say you can't fast during Ramadan.
Yeah, or they're trying to persuade kids not to fast during Ramadan. Some schools and head teachers are trying to persuade Muslim girls to take off the hijab, etc., etc. So this is all happening slowly, and it's getting more of a problem. I've certainly noticed it. So we're moving towards the French model of secularism, whereby everyone has to be English. We've all got to sing "God Save the King." We've all got to kind of hide our religious identity more and more. So a clash is happening. On the one hand, you have a mainstream society which is getting more right-wing and less tolerant of diversity, and at the same time, you have a Muslim community which is now about 5 million strong, which is clinging tightly to its religious identity. So this is where the tension is happening.
Wow. Sheikh, the growth of Islam means no freedom of speech in the West.
What do you mean, the growth of Islam?
I mean, because Islam is growing. It's the fastest growing religion in the world.
Yeah.
people are, I see the dawah work that happens in the West and also now in the US. So are you saying that as Islam, it becomes more and more influential, you're going to see West? See, that's the question I was asking, Sheikh. That do you see that? Is it they cannot argue Islam? They cannot argue with the intellectual Islam that's out there. So, is that the real concern, or is it? Or is it just elections that, okay, look, it's a political thing, let's ban them, let's get maybe 50 extra votes from the right wingers? Is it that, or what is it that you are observing long term?
I mean, this is what I say about the prescription of groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir. It's not really about Hizb ut-Tahrir, it's more about the ideas, I think. And the
Islam is growing.
They want to put limits on Islam in this country. And yes, the Muslims were a bit too confident, and we're a bit too sure of ourselves, and we're a bit too cocky and a bit too loud. And it's becoming a bit of a concern. We're a bit too good at debating them and questioning their foreign policy and the values underpinning their societies. And yeah, so I'm being honest with you. This is the way it's going. I mean, obviously, some Muslims. This is the debate within the Muslim community. Some are saying, look, we need to calm down a little bit. We need to be a little bit less in your face, as a community, so that the wider community goes a bit easier on us. And others are saying, no. What is the reason why we're here? Because we shouldn't just be here to accumulate wealth. We shouldn't be here for the dunya. The only real reason why Muslims should be in Western countries in such large numbers is to give dawah. And if we're not giving dawah, why are we here? And of course, if we're going to give dawah, then there's going to be a pushback. But we have to be brave. We have to be stand up. We've got to be ready to sacrifice, etc., etc. Even if that means sacrificing some of our, economic wealth, our freedoms, etc., etc. So this is the debate going on within the Muslim community now. 5 pillars. We stand on the side of no. We have to keep pushing, and we have to keep delivering the message. And if the wider society wants to reject that message, wants to persecute us, for delivering that message, then that's fine, because we're just following the path of the Anbiya at the end of the day.
So, Sheikh, 5 pillars is very unique. I mean, I've been following it for the 10 years since it began. I mean, I knew Brother Dili, at least. I've never met him, but I was following him, and we knew him even before that. And then you guys came on the scene. It just. What does it take to put together a media outlet like this, Sheikh? And when you say support, what kind of support does it need, number one? What does it take to put together something like that? And why is it even more important now to support such organizations, in many ways supporting the truth, Sheikh? Because, you would be the voice of the oppressed, you would be the voice of the truth, in many ways, because you have the skills.
What does it take to put together? Well, in terms of resources, it didn't take a lot to begin. I mean, I spent, out of my own pocket, I spent maybe about £2,000. What is that? About $2,500 or $3,000, creating a website. And that's how I started 5 Pillars. And Dili came on very shortly after me. We knew each other from previous journalistic work. So we didn't take any salaries at all for the first 5 years. So that's how I started 5 Pillars, with just £3,000 to £2,000, created a website, and then I started to upload material. I mean, I think Dili and myself were both at an advantage in that we had journalistic skills. You see, a lot of people that create these media institutions, they have no journalistic skills. They're amateurs. Whereas I had already been a journalist for 15 years at that point. So I had contacts all over the world, a lot of goodwill I could draw upon, as well as production skills, both in writing articles and doing videos, etc., social media, etc. And Dili was a trained journalist as well, and is a trained journalist. He was at the beginning of his career when he joined us, but has grown now to become an exceptional journalist and an exceptional da'i, I would say, And so but in terms of actual money, it didn't cost us a lot. And I got that money back, that £2,000 investment. I got that back within a couple of months because people started donating straight away. They could see the value of what we were talking about. They could see that we were talking about stuff the mainstream media wasn't talking about and giving an Islamic angle. They could see that we needed to be in the driving seat as Muslims to create our own stories, to create our own narrative, rather than, begging at the table of the mainstream media for a few crumbs here and there, and then seeing them distort what we're saying, seeing them put their own framework upon, our own stories. So I think from very early on, it took off quite quickly. And then we started getting censored on social media, and we still are to this day. But we moved on to other platforms. When Facebook censored us, we moved on to Twitter, and then we moved on to YouTube. And we've had a lot of censorship over the years. And there were a lot of challenges for us that other bigger organizations don't face. But we built it up slowly, and that was always my idea, because right at the beginning, the first year, we got offers of hundreds of thousands of pounds from, countries that wanted to basically, spread their propaganda through Five Pillars, and we turned it down because the only reason why I started Five Pillars, it wasn't for dunya. It was, of course, I want to make a living out of it, and I want to feed myself and my family. But at the same time, we did this, basically, we did this for Islam. I actually see it as a form of dawah, and perhaps my ticket to Jannah as well, because I'm a very flawed person and I have many sins, etc., etc. So I thought this is the one way where I can worship Allah, and the one thing that I have perhaps skill-wise that a lot of other Muslims don't. So I saw it as an act of ibadah, and so we built it up slowly, and over the years people just saw the need for it because we were presenting narratives and they were going viral as well. They were getting a lot of, we were getting on such meager resources, we were getting videos that would go more viral than the BBC or CNN, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's been my strategy, to slowly build it up over the years. And now, alhamdulillah, we're at the level where, we have several members of staff. We have freelancers all over the world. We're present on most of the social media platforms. And we still face many challenges, but I think people can see the need for Five Pillars now, and the need for independent Muslim media, which isn't state-funded or sectarian-funded. And I think that has only been exacerbated by the current crisis in Gaza, and especially the I would say, persecution that Muslims and pro-Palestinians are facing in this country over the last 3 months.
Sheikh, how important is it that the Muslims acquire these skills, especially in the West? So it's a two-pronged question. Number one, how important is it that the Muslims acquire these skills? And number two, you have also worked with journalists in the Muslim world. Do you see a difference between the journalists in the East and in the West? What do you see? What are the differences and the thinking process between the two?
How important? I think everyone needs to. This is one of the projects actually that we want to start, is to disseminate these journalistic skills, not just to Muslims that want to work in the media, but to everybody. Because everyone has a smartphone these days, but they don't necessarily know how to film with a smartphone in a professional way. Everyone could set up a website and write a blog, for example, but they don't have necessarily the editorial skills to write an engaging, factually accurate and well-sourced article, or a feature or an opinion piece, and stay within the law, etc., etc. So my idea actually is one of the projects that we're trying to get funding for, is to start some kind of journalism school, which is not just open just to journalists, but actually everyone. Because if we can create an army of of citizen Muslim journalists all around the world, just think how that could compound over time to disseminate the message of Islam. If we all have the skills to speak to camera in an eloquent way and deliver a message clearly and factually correct, if we all have the skills to film beautifully with our smartphones, if we all have the skills to write incredible articles, or even social media posts that grab attention, that have the potential to go viral, just think what that could mean in terms of disseminating Islam around the world. So that's my idea. I do think it's important that Muslims go into the media. However, I would discourage Muslims going into the mainstream media, because I mean, a lot of Muslims that I see, and I think they're pathetic, to be honest. They'll work for CNN or the BBC. They'll think they've made it, and they'll boast about it. Oh, I work for the New York Times. I've made it. And no, you haven't made it. You're just a pawn in a big machine that will crush you. You know, you are literally, they're using you because you're a brown face, and it's tokenism. So I actually discourage Muslims from going to the mainstream media. But if you have to go in there, don't stay there long. Just go there like I did, get the skills, the professional skills, and then leave, and then work in the service of Islam for the rest of your life. Even if that means not earning as much money. And believe you me, if you're a Muslim journalist, you will not earn as much money. But that's a sacrifice that I think is worth making personally. So I do think Muslims need to go in the media more, because obviously we tend to tell our children, get an education, become a doctor and a lawyer, and make lots of money, get a big house, get a big car, and you made it. But I mean, I don't see that as the purpose of my life, you know, and we're on this earth for a short period of time, and I think we'll be in the akhirah a lot longer. So, you know, inshallah, my monetary reward, or my luxury reward, inshallah, will be in the akhirah. But at the same time, you know, we have to create institutions where, you know, our journalists are not living in poverty. You know, otherwise they just won't come and work with us. They have to earn a decent salary. So the sacrifice isn't so great, because everyone has to pay their bills. So I do encourage Muslims to look into journalism, and those that are not going to make a career out of it, I would say to them, it's important that you get the editorial skills, the technical skills anyway, to be able to film, to be able to edit, to be able to write articles, or even catchy social media posts, etc., because you don't have to be a professional journalist to still use journalistic skills to disseminate Islam and Islamic messages. In terms of the second part of your question about the East and the West, unfortunately, Muslim journalists living in, I mean, alhamdulillah, I've been to about 25 to 30 Muslim countries, and met journalists in every single one of them. And unfortunately, we tend not to have the editorial skills in the Muslim world, with some exceptions. So obviously there are amazing journalists working for Al Jazeera Arabic, for example. But they just don't have the training, I guess. And they've lived in environments and countries which devalue the media, where becoming a journalist is not perceived to be a fantastic career choice. Often they can't, you know, there's no freedom of speech, so they can't get those journalistic skills. So, the Muslim journalists in the Muslim world, they don't tend to have the skills, even if they have the knowledge and, you know, the Islam in them, that if they had those skills, they would be able to disseminate them better. Whereas journalists in the West, they have editorial skills because they've gone through a rigorous training process and experience process in media institutions, but they don't have those spiritual, religious values. They lack the ideology, and they lack the faith.
So, I mean, this is the way I'm hearing you. If you're going to go into this profession, you have to understand Islam. I mean,
well, what's the point if you're a Muslim and everything ultimately comes under that umbrella? I mean, I would say if I'm a doctor, then I'm a Muslim doctor. You know, if I'm a lawyer, then I'm a Muslim lawyer. You know, that's how I see life. I don't see my professional life as divorced from my spiritual life. It's all part of the same, and ultimately it's all about ibadah, you know? So you see it that way?
No, of course, that's what, no, see the thing, Sheikh, even in the work that we do, of course, if you don't understand the deen, you know, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You won't know what is the point of, you know, we do a lot of fundraisers, we do a lot of funding across the world, different projects, you know, all over the world. And of course, if you don't have the Islam, the motivation is no longer fi sabilillah, rather it's just humanitarian, you know, as there is no Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the equation, then there is no reward. There's no point of doing this. But I guess the reason I was emphasizing on the Islam, saying that, is that because then you are you know that you have to speak the truth. And how important is that, Sheikh? And when it comes to journalism, I mean, especially in today's world, I think journalists play almost the same role as scholars in many ways. They are in front of the TV, they're speaking to thousands, if not millions of people. What they say has an impact, just like many scholars have an impact. So how important is that, Sheikh? Yani, you know, to understand the truth. Let's say, when you say Islam, what does a journalist really have to understand? I mean, do they have to understand politics the way they are? Does it matter what kind of ideological leanings you have so that you understand how to filter what you're seeing?
I mean, you don't have to be. I mean, look. I mean, I'm not an alim, and you don't. I'm not saying you have to be an alim to become.
Oh no, I'm saying that you almost play the role as far as bringing the truth the way it is in front of the masses.
Yeah, absolutely. You have, and it is a privilege, but it's a responsibility as well. So, I mean, as far as Five Pillars is concerned, we have a Shura Council made up of some of the most prominent ulama in the United Kingdom, from all the different Sunni sects, basically. And they keep us in check. And they are our guides. So Dilly and me, basically, we drive the editorial policy of Five Pillars. But if we feel that there is something where maybe editorially we shouldn't be saying, or we've made a mistake, then we will take Shura. I'll give you two examples. One is when a famous British influencer, Muslim influencer, took off her hijab and stopped wearing the hijab. So obviously this is something that would interest our audience, but we weren't sure how they would react. So we took Shura with our ulama, and we said, should we present this story? Because it could encourage people to take off hijab, Muslim women to take off hijab, if we report the story. And eventually we came to the conclusion, with some disagreement, that no, actually it's okay. And the reaction was mainly that no, she had made a mistake in taking off hijab, and this was haram, etc. So, you know, you have to trust the community. Another example was Mufti Menk. When Mufti Menk basically...
I guess it was the iftar thing, I remember, yeah.
We sat down with some Zionists in the UAE. Obviously, the Mufti Menk is probably the... I was going to say he's the Cristiano Ronaldo of Dawah. I know that's not an appropriate comment, but you know what I mean? He's like the top guy when it comes to Dawah, you know, in the world. So he's not someone that we should target. And of course, we shouldn't target any ulama. But we felt quite strongly that he shouldn't have done what he'd done, and he should have exercised more responsibility. And with that great power comes responsibility. He should have known better. And what he had done had really hurt the feelings of Palestinians. And I think we have been vindicated over time as well, because now you can see how the UAE are basically collaborating with Israel in this genocide in Gaza. But it was a difficult call to make, because obviously he is a man who has converted thousands and thousands of people to our wonderful religion. So we didn't take that decision lightly. But after Shura, we decided that it was the right thing to do. The last example was when a famous footballer was a Muslim footballer, was convicted of drink driving in the United Kingdom. Now, again, you could say that this was his private sin, and we shouldn't have been exposing his private sin. Others said, no. As soon as he got behind the wheel when he was drunk, he was literally putting the lives of innocent human beings in danger, and therefore we should report this case. It's gone to court. We're not delving into his private life. It's become a public matter. It's gone to court. He's been convicted. He's been jailed. So we should report on this. So there was a difference between the ulama whether we should report or not. So what I'm trying to say to you is that we take very seriously our responsibility as journalists. And when there are contentious issues, we consult the ulama. And if there is a consensus amongst the ulama that no, what you're doing is haram, then there is no way on earth that we would print that story or run with that story.
Sheikh, when you're looking at the journalists in Gaza, I mean, I think so far, I don't know, 30, 40 killed, maybe 50 killed. I don't have the exact number in front of me. Maybe more, I'm sure. Well, almost 30,000 more people killed. So I'm sure. What goes through your mind, Sheikh, that when you're seeing the journalists being killed like that?
I mean, for me, I don't put journalists in any special category above other human beings or other, doctors or street cleaners or whatever. It's all innocent human beings, our brothers and sisters that have been massacred. May Allah have mercy on them and give them the highest stations of Jannah. But obviously, I see a lot of hypocrisy. I mean, first of all, they're heroes. They're literally putting their lives on the line to bring us the news, and we wouldn't have this news if it weren't for them. And 5 pillars, we're not allowed into Gaza. We're not allowed into Gaza.
I was going to ask you that.
Sorry,
have you tried to get in there?
Of course, we're not allowed. Not just us, but mainstream media isn't allowed, apart from if you embed yourself with the Israeli, defense force or offense force, as I like to call it. And
occupation force.
Yeah, so we're not allowed into Gaza at all. So obviously, we are reliant on the citizen journalists in Gaza at the moment. They're the real heroes of this story, not 5 pillars or anyone else. They're the real heroes. And when I see them being massacred, what I think is that I see a lot of hypocrisy because, if one Western journalist was killed in Gaza, it would be front page news all around the world for days. It would be 24-hour coverage on CNN, etc., etc. Okay, if one Western journalist was killed, but over 100 journalists have been slaughtered and some have been targeted. Like Wael al-Dahdu's son was literally targeted, and it makes a bit of news here and there, but then people forget very quickly. We know very well that Muslim journalists' lives are worth less, in the eyes of the West. Our lives are worth less than a non-Muslim. This is a reality, Sheikh.
Sheikh, now that opens up a whole different ballgame, Sheikh. As far as, as far as how, what is how can Muslims really, every form of expressions that Muslims can, it's being banned. It's, ideologically, intellectually, not allowed to be even where massacres are being committed, not allowed to speak regarding these, genocides or massacres. Sheikh, have you ever been pressured by foreign governments? Like, for instance, I was thinking, where, like Babri Masjid now in India, I'm sure you guys have covered it. I haven't been on 5 pillars, but, with the Babri Masjid situation in India, of course, Gaza, and there are many, many very sensitive issues going on in the world. We are Muslims with China and things like this. When you cover these things and the influence that you have in UK with the British Muslims, have you ever been threatened or put in a situation where you've been told, you need to calm down?
Yes. Well, we're actually banned in India. 5 pillars is banned in India. Yeah, we were banned 2 years ago because of the coverage we were doing on India. We have a correspondent in India, in New Delhi. He's in hiding. He's in hiding for his life. So he feeds us stories and he feeds us videos, and a lot of those videos go viral. So alhamdulillah, he's doing an excellent job, but he is in hiding. So we are banned in India because of these stories that we have done on the Hindutva. We are also banned in Pakistan, believe it or not. Because we have done stories about the Pakistani army and the ISI disappearing people off the street and Islamic activists basically being disappeared, and we are banned in Pakistan as well. So you can only access 5 pillars in Pakistan through a VPN. So yeah, we have these pressures from foreign governments. Internally, yes, Dili Hussein got a visit by the deputy editor. My deputy, Dili Hussein, was visited by the police about a month or so ago. I'm not sure whether you're aware of this.
Yeah, because of his covering on Gaza situation. Yeah, it seems like.
We get funny phone calls all the time. We get our phones hacked. We get family members targeted. So a lot of things are going on behind the scenes. You know how the deep state works in America and in Britain.
I know, of course, we are not aware.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you guys in America are aware of the spying and surveillance. So obviously, these countries on the surface, they portray themselves as bastions of freedom and democracy, But behind the scenes, a lot of subtle pressure is going on. And that usually involves hacking of phones, and blackmail and attempts to destroy your reputation, kind of, threats of revealing stuff, which some of it might be true, some of it might be complete lies, some of it might be half-truths. And a lot of Muslim leaders, obviously, and it's not just Muslim leaders, this happens also to any kind of perceived opponent of the state or dissident. So it could happen to environmental groups. It could happen to certain left-wing groups or anti-war groups. They will get their phones tapped, and subtle pressure will be put on them, sometimes blatant pressure, and a lot of them will succumb, and they will say that this is not worth it, and I'm going to take a lower profile. I think myself and Dilly, we've already decided that we're in this till the end, and whatever happens, even if we lose our freedom, this is not a path that we're gonna kind of veer from. This is the path we've chosen, and even if it means losing our freedom, having our reputations destroyed, and attempts to blackmail us and whatever, then we're not going to veer from this path, and we leave everything in the hands of Allah.
Allah. Sheikh, you were in Afghanistan. I think you've covered Syria also. I don't know if you were in Syria or
not Syria. I visited Syria, but I didn't cover the war. No.
Okay.
No.
Did you see any difference in Afghanistan versus any other country?
Oh, well, of course. I've been to Afghanistan twice. I've been to Afghanistan twice since the Islamic Emirate was created. And inshallah, we will visit Afghanistan again after Ramadan. Alhamdulillah. Obviously, the what you see in the mainstream media isn't the reality on the ground. Alhamdulillah, the occupiers have been booted out of the country. Alhamdulillah, there is peace and security by and large over the country. Alhamdulillah, the levels of corruption which existed under the US occupation are virtually zero now. Alhamdulillah, drug production has virtually been eliminated. So there's so many positives. Obviously, the economic situation, it's getting better, but it's not as, ultimately the Americans in Kabul especially, they brought a lot of money to Kabul. Not so much outside of Kabul, but I think people in Kabul they, especially after the sanctions and the money was stolen by the Americans, economically the situation wasn't great, but it's getting better slowly and slowly and slowly. Obviously, the women's education thing, the girls' education thing, is a big hot button issue. I think it divides Muslims around the world. I personally would like to see girls being educated and it being more of a priority for the Islamic Emirate. I've spoken to them directly about that and told them about that, and they listen, but they politely kind of, it's something that I think has been decided at the top levels. And I think there are elements of the Taliban that would like to change that policy, but ultimately Sheikh Hibatullah has decided, and he is the leader. So I think that's not going to change anytime quickly. I wish it would, because I think I would encourage Western Muslims to visit Afghanistan, to go on holiday there. But I think we'd also like to take our families there. We'd like to take our wives and our children and our daughters as well. And I think it might be a bit of an uncomfortable experience for them, because they might not be able to to visit, parks, and et cetera, et cetera. So I generally am a supporter of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, but I would say a critical friend to them as well.
Sheikh, who is speaking the truth? I mean, when we're following when we're following media and people are trying to do analysis, people are trying to figure out, there's so much out there. What is one skill that you think that at least Muslims should acquire, especially in the environment that we are in, that they somehow...
I think for the average person, I think it's discernment, really, because, in the old days, even in the UK, when I was growing up, we just had 3 channels, and we had newspapers that were basically in control of the whole narrative. But now the world we live in is a world where we have alternative media, and most of us get our news from social media rather than the mainstream channels. But still, it can be a bit confusing. I think what I would do if I was just a viewer and consumer, I'm a producer, but I'm also a consumer of news and opinion and analysis like everyone else. What I do is I tend to try and get my news from different sources. So, of course, I will follow the Muslim sources, but I will also follow the Western sources just to see what they're saying. I'll even follow the Israelis just to see what they're saying. And obviously, they're talking bakwas, all the time. But it's still interesting to hear what they have to say, so that we can counter their arguments, And so I personally will try and get as much information from different sources as possible, and then I will try to make up my own mind. So that's my own personal tip, I would say, is if you read something, don't read it from one source. Try and get a few sources, especially if it's something that something like COVID, for example. Obviously that's a controversial topic. So if you're thinking about, is it real? Is it a hoax? Is it something that was, exploited, etc., then read what the BBC has to say. Also read what others have to say, and then come to your own conclusion. Because everyone puts their spin on things. And even we at Five Pillars, obviously, we put our spin on things, and we champion in the Muslim community. So we're championing Islam. We're not doing neutral, objective journalism. We are doing biased journalism, but journalism which is biased in favor of Islam and Muslims, but at the same time, which is accurate. We don't lie. Even if that means saying things which can be, not detrimental, but can perhaps not portray Muslims in the best light sometimes. We feel that we have to be fair and accurate because we have to be credible as well. We can't print, rubbish. Whatever we say is accurate, but of course we will frame it within an Islamic framework. And ultimately, Muslims make lots of mistakes. Islam is perfect, Muslims are imperfect.
Sheikh, 2 questions, last 2. I know that was the last question, but number 1, where will Five Pillars be in the next 5 years, 10 years? And number 2, what happens now to the Muslim community? Where is it? Obviously, it feels a bit threatened. I'm sure that they're like, okay, what is this? Is new, and because then that's also connected to journalism and how much you can say. Did you see? Have you, as journalists, let's say, are you already since the ban on groups like HD and things like that? Have you seen yourself, or let's say it's other Muslim organizations, toned down already? And does that mean in the next 5-10 years that toning down is going to go down to almost mute? Can that happen?
It well does. I mean, I'll be honest, Sheikh, we do self-censor because we have to. We would get banned. Let's say, for example, if we talked openly about, we do talk about LGBT a lot, but if for example, if we put a video on Facebook, basically, like Dilly did. Dilly basically outlined, he went on holiday to Jordan. And during his holiday to Jordan, he visited the cave, or what is reputed to be the cave of Prophet Lut, alayhi salam. And outside of that cave, he outlined the normative Islamic position on homosexuality. He put it on Facebook. We got a ban from Facebook. We were banned from Facebook for a period of time. We were also fined by our regulator here in the UK. We were fined £3,000. So obviously, we don't do that on Facebook anymore. But we might do it on Twitter, where there's more freedom of speech. Or we might do it on other platforms where we can speak more openly. So we do self-censor because we are living in Western countries which have
that used to be
laws.
The thing, right? I mean, that was the thing. Living in the Western countries was, okay, look, we are not in the Muslim world. We already know we were being censored and all of that. But I guess I'm also asking, what will be the effect on the intellectual growth of the Muslims because of this constant...
I mean, in terms of Five Pillars, we'll always push it to the limit in terms of what we can say. If we get to the point where we can't really say anything, and all we can say is so muted that it's not really worth saying, then I think that's the end of Five Pillars. I won't want to work here anymore. I'll do something else. I'll go sweep the streets. I'll go, earn my living, selling kebabs, whatever. Because I don't want to do that kind of journalism. It doesn't have any interest for me, and it's not part of my mission. So if it comes to that, then Five Pillars will not exist anymore. Not in the UK anyway. Perhaps we'll move to another country and where we can operate. I think, I don't know, Allahu Alim, in terms of where Five Pillars will be in 5 years and where the Muslim community will be. I think we're at an inflection point now. It's very interesting what will happen. Will we double down in terms
I guess that's
of
what I'm asking. Because UK has played, as you said in the beginning, UK has played a huge role within the Western, at least within the West. The Muslims of UK have played the major role. I think even for Islam, the growth of Islam and taking stands, and really they have been an example. But now, that's the concern I have, is that do you think that kind of standing up and speaking up, that attitude will start, we're not going to see that anymore.
I
that gave confidence to the rest of the Muslims across the West.
I think in terms of what usually happens with a diaspora community is that over the years they assimilate. And they become like the majority community. They lose their language, they lose their deen, whether it's the Hindu community or the Buddhists or the Jews, etc., etc. I think a miracle of Allah, to be honest. It's such a blessing, such a barakah, that British Muslims, by and large, we have held tight to the rope of Islam. And that is becoming a problem for the wider community now. But we haven't assimilated. We haven't assimilated to the extent that maybe American Muslims have. I mean, I've never been to America. I'm talking in general terms. When I see American Muslims, I see a lot of Muslims openly espousing LGBT,
very vague,
values.
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I basically see a community, I think, that is sold out to a large extent. I'm sorry if I'm going to offend you a little bit.
No, you're not from anybody. Thank you for saying that.
Of American Muslims.
No, Jazakallah khair for saying that, because it's a shame what's happening. It's really a shame what's happening.
No,
and we're going to see imams giving us khutbahs who will be homosexuals in few more months, or if not years. That's how that's how it's going.
What I think I've seen in North America is the Muslim community in North America is an affluent community compared to even the wider population. Whereas in the UK, the Muslim community here is actually a poorer community. On all the socioeconomic levels, we live in much worse housing. We earn much less money. We have worse jobs, worse educational outcomes, employment outcomes, etc., etc. So we generally are a working class community in this country that has been oppressed by the wider culture. Whereas I think the Muslim community in America, you've done quite well financially out of America and Canada, but you've done less spiritually well. I would say that the Muslims in Britain, we've done far less financially well, but we've done better spiritually. And ultimately, that's why I would never swap America for Britain if I was going to live in a non-Muslim country. Because I see American Muslims and I just see the most cringeworthy, sellout kind of stuff going on. And
take it easy, brother. Take it easy.
No, but I'm like, what are you guys doing, man? What are you guys doing?
It's true, brother. It's true. I'm just playing with you, but that's true.
No, but obviously I'm not talking about you, Sheikh. You got a wonderful big beard there. But it's like I'm talking about, I see some. I won't name names, but I see some very prominent Muslims in America, and I'm thinking, man, what are you guys doing there? You're just accumulating dunya, and you're ruining your souls. And do you even believe in a place called akhirah? That's what I'm thinking.
Yes.
Whereas, alhamdulillah, we are akhirah centered here in the UK. We have our sellouts here, brother. We have many sellouts. We have many coconuts. We have many native informers, just like you guys have over there. But alhamdulillah, they are in the minority here in the UK.
Yeah. I don't know.
So, subhanallah, when I look at American Muslims, I think I count my blessings that I don't live in America.
No, Sheikh, that is true, and that's what I'm actually, that's what I was saying. That subhanallah, I mean, Britain was and it is till today. I mean, we've always looked at brothers there, and we've always said subhanallah. Look, I mean, they've produced some of the best dawah carriers. They've produced some of the best. They stand up, they take a stand, they say what they need to say, to be said. Even many times when we started work in many different parts of the world, we were encouraged and motivated when we saw the brothers in the UK doing what they were doing and said, man, we need to do something like that. So it's just that was my concern, is that when this kind of bans happen, are we going to see less and less of that, or are we going to see more? Because it could be more. It could be that, what, now you're going after our even intellectual growth, for God's sakes. You don't, this is a jail you're putting us in.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't answer your question, brother. I went off on a bit of a rant against American Muslims.
No, it's okay. Well taken.
No, yeah, just to answer your question directly, I don't know, brother. I honestly don't know. I think it could go either way. I think what I see in my circles is a determination to fight, is a determination to sacrifice. But at the same time, are Muslims scared and intimidated? Yes, they are. And a lot of Muslims, and I would say maybe they're even the majority, but I think it's the role of Muslim activists with influence and power to show a lead to the awam, and it's our job to do that. And I see a lot of desire to do that. I also see a lot of desire of British Muslims to make hijrah now, because the pressure is getting quite a lot now. The Islamophobia, the political pressure. It's getting to the point where a lot of Muslims, including myself, I have these thoughts all the time. It's like, do I really want to live here with people that don't like me and hate me, and they would like to see my freedom of speech taken away? They'd like to see me in jail, these thoughts are going through my head as well. I've come to the conclusion that, alhamdulillah, I've always traveled a lot in the Muslim world and had that kind of time that I spent, every year in the Muslim world to have that, to see the beauty, but also to see the faults, because we know that the Muslim world is far from perfect. But yeah, I feel like I'm at the point of my life now, I'm getting a little bit older, and I'd like to live at least half the year in another country, in a Muslim country, and not spend so much of my year here. But then people are telling me, actually, Roshan, you're more effective as an activist in the UK than you would be in an Arab country or a Muslim country, etc. So that's what.
How do you balance that, Sheikh? That's the same thing I've been told many times. Look, the kind of things that you're doing right now here in the West, you're not going to be able to do that anywhere in the Muslim world. I don't know how Turkey is, but maybe Turkey, but because I see a lot of people moving to Turkey and things like that. But what is your view on that issue, Sheikh? When you look at what you're able to do from there.
I would make hijrah tomorrow if I could.
So what does if I could mean? What does that define? What is if I could?
Well, we all have responsibilities. We all have obstacles in our way. And we all have genuine reasons why we can't make hijrah. And that could be, we might have elderly parents that can't move,
right?
That need a health system. We might have, family that won't move. We might have genuine reasons why we can't make hijrah. And quite frankly, if we're doing dawah, maybe we shouldn't make hijrah because, we have a role to play here. But I personally, in my heart, I don't like living in a non-Muslim country.
Is that because you're worried about your kids too, Sheikh? In my thing, I'm always constantly worried about my children's children. Are they going to be Muslim? Are they going to hear?
I don't want my children and grandchildren and hopefully great-great-grandchildren, etc., to live in Dar al-Kufr. That's my own personal take.
Yeah.
And I don't want myself to live the rest of my life in a non-Muslim environment. And I know people will say to me, oh, try it in the Muslim world. And I have lived in the Muslim world. And I'm very, very, my eyes are very, very open to the faults of the Muslim world. However, there's still something about having a mosque on every corner,
right,
having the opportunity to learn Islam if you want to take that opportunity to learn the Arabic language, especially, which is very important to me. even the weather is, quite frankly, something which is better in the Muslim world, and just the overall environment, is something that I enjoy personally, and I like that sweetness. But at the same time, it's true. Probably we're more likely to get arrested for doing activism in most Muslim countries than we are in America or the UK. So it's not a black and white answer, but personally, living in this country comes a great sacrifice for me, a personal sacrifice. I don't want to be here. I don't want to live in a non-Muslim country. But there are reasons why I stay. Some of them within my control, some of them out of my control.
Khair, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair. This is it's a very important discussion, Sheikh, especially having journalists. Somebody that has put together, a channel, a website, a source, a platform like 5 Pillars. It's really an honor to have you on the show, Sheikh. And hopefully you keep coming back because I really believe we need journalists with skills like yours that can actually become this, voice for the voiceless, voice for the oppressed. It is a necessity as we go on, because, if we didn't have the right Muslim, let's say even Al Jazeera, for whatever, it's worth, if we did not have that, we wouldn't have the coverage that we have, that we're seeing from Gaza. I don't know if we would be able to see what we're seeing, because people are obviously shocked because they're seeing these videos and all these pictures and all this information coming out of Gaza because of journalists like Al Jazeera and others. So it's very important, Sheikh, that we have people play the role that you are playing. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, and may Allah continue to use you, and make dua for the Muslims in America, Sheikh.
I do, yes.
We are in need.
I'm sorry,
we are in need.
I was a bit harsh there, but
no.
Yeah,
but it's needed. I hope a lot of people hear what you're saying, because that's an observation which is a truthful one. Unfortunately, the wealth here has caused a lot of people to move away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lose their dunya, and it is a constant thing that we are seeing, Sheikh. Unless you were put in you were able to get some ideas that reconnected you back to Islam. If not, man, what we are seeing is beyond belief already. Subhanallah. All right, Shaykh, Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah protect you, preserve you, and continue to use you. And in any way that we can help, please connect. And we'll connect after the show anyway. I will have to talk to you. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And for the rest of you brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khair for watching. That's a very important interview. Please, share that, and encourage your children to be more than just doctors and engineers and businessmen, because we need people who can speak the truth, people who have the skills to spread the truth, people who have the skills to analyze and filter and give the things the way they need to be given. And these skills are needed, brothers and sisters, especially for the Muslim community in the West and the East. We'll see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر لا لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا